I'm not really the kind of guy who posts on forums like this, but what happened to me last year still keeps me up some nights, and I honestly don't know where else to talk about it. At the time, I had just gone through a messy separation with my wife. I was 32, working freelance from home as a graphic designer, and needed to get out of the city for a while. I found this old foreclosed house about 40 minutes outside Columbus, Ohio. It was dirt cheap, kind of rundown but livable. The listing said it had been sitting empty since 2014, after the owner, a man in his 70s, died alone and wasn't found for over a week. Creepy, sure, but I didn't care. I just wanted space and quiet. From the outside, it looked like every other neglected house in rural Ohio: peeling paint, dead flower beds, a cracked walkway overtaken by weeds. But it had this weird symmetry to it, like the windows were all watching you. Inside, the place had that thick, stale smell of disuse. You know the kind: dust layered over old wood, faint rot behind the walls. The power and water had been shut off for years, so I had to get everything turned back on, which took almost a week. The first few nights, I stayed on an air mattress in the living room with my dog, Murphy. He'd bark randomly at the ceiling or stand growling at the base of the staircase. I chalked it up to the new environment. The weirdness started small. On the third night, I was up late working when I heard the sound of a phone ringing. A sharp, old-school ring, not a cell phone. It was coming from the kitchen. Confused, I walked in and found an old beige wall-mounted landline, something I hadn't even noticed before, just hanging there like it belonged to a different decade. It was ringing, loud and steady. I picked it up and nothing, just static. I figured it must have been some weird electrical feedback from when the lines were reconnected. I yanked the cord out of the wall. But the next night it rang again. Same static. And the line was still disconnected. Then I started noticing things out of place. At first, I blamed myself. I'd leave my coffee mug on the counter and find it on the windowsill. My laptop, always kept on the desk, once ended up on the couch when I came back from taking Murphy on a walk. The worst was when I went to bed and woke up to find the hallway light on, despite always turning it off before sleeping. One night I set up my phone to record while I was asleep. I didn't catch much, just soft creaks and what might have been footsteps. But what really unsettled me was around the 3:14 a.m. mark. The footage jerked like someone had nudged the phone, and you could hear this low, breathy exhale right next to it. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just paranoia. It was this cold pressure in the room, like eyes on the back of my neck. I stopped sleeping upstairs and moved my mattress back to the living room. Murphy wouldn't even go near the staircase anymore. He'd just sit by the front door, ears up, eyes locked on the landing like he was expecting someone to come down. One morning, I noticed a faint handprint on the bathroom mirror. I hadn't used the mirror yet that day. It was too high for me to have left it accidentally, and it wasn't mine. It was smaller, thinner, like from a woman or a child. I scrubbed it off with glass cleaner, but the next day it was back. Same exact shape, same exact spot. That's when I decided to check the attic. I hadn't gone up there since I moved in. The pull-down ladder was stiff, and it groaned like something waking up as I dragged it down. The attic itself was freezing, way colder than the rest of the house, and it had this smell, like rust, damp cardboard, and old cologne. I brought a flashlight and swept it slowly across the space. Most of it was empty, just dust and insulation. But in the far corner, behind the HVAC duct, were two small wooden boxes. Both were locked. Old padlocks, rusted shut. The weird part was that the dust around the boxes had been disturbed, like someone had moved them recently. I brought them down with me, intending to open them later. That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt amplified. Pipes groaning, wood creaking. The occasional rustle like fabric shifting somewhere nearby. I kept the attic boxes at the foot of my mattress, which in hindsight feels so stupid, but at the time I didn't know what else to do. Around 2:30 a.m., Murphy started whining. I turned over and saw him staring straight at the boxes, tail between his legs. Then he growled. A deep, low sound I'd never heard from him before. That's when I heard it too. 3 soft thuds upstairs. Like someone had dropped something heavy and tried to muffle it. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. The attic door was down again. I swear on my life, I'd locked it up tight just hours earlier. The next morning, I pried open the boxes with a crowbar. The first one was full of receipts, junk mail, and old Polaroids. Random stuff from the guy who used to live there. But the second one made my stomach drop. Inside were dozens of photographs. Printed on cheap, glossy paper, most were taken from outside my house. Through windows, behind bushes, even one from the woods out back. But here's the thing. These weren't old. They were of me. Sitting at my desk, walking Murphy, eating cereal in the kitchen. They were all taken after I moved in. The most recent one was from 2 nights ago. I was asleep, sprawled out in the living room, and the photo had been taken from just inside the hallway. I felt sick. I kept flipping through the photos, my hands shaking so bad I dropped a few. I remember just sitting there on the floor for what felt like an hour, staring at that last photo. Someone had been in my house. Someone had been close enough to hear me breathe while I slept. I called the sheriff's department right away. When the deputy showed up, I laid everything out. Photos, boxes, the disconnected phone, even showed him the attic. He was polite, but I could tell he thought I was exaggerating. Said the photos could have been old, maybe from a PI the previous owner hired. He promised to file a report and told me to install cameras, but nothing ever came of it. No follow-up, no investigation, just shrugged it off. That night I didn't sleep. I kept every light on in the house and sat in the corner with a baseball bat. Murphy wouldn't stop pacing. Around 3 a.m. the landline rang again. I had ripped it off the wall completely at this point, wires dangling like veins. Still it rang, loud, piercing. I didn't answer. I couldn't. A few minutes later, I heard a soft creak above me. The attic. I grabbed my keys, scooped up Murphy, and ran out of the house barefoot. I didn't stop until I was parked at a 24-hour gas station 10 miles down the road. I sat there till sunrise, just watching the windows, half expecting to see someone crawl out of my back seat. I never went back. I listed the house as is the next week. Took a loss and moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Columbus. I still have nightmares about that last night, about the feeling of someone standing just out of sight, about the photos, especially that one where I'm asleep. I showed it to a friend once, and they pointed out something I hadn't noticed before. In the far left of the frame, just barely visible in the hallway shadows, there's a figure. Tall, lean. No face, just the outline of someone standing there, watching. It's been a year. I still don't know who it was, or why, or how they got in. Sometimes I wonder if they ever really left, but I keep the doors locked now. I don't answer unknown numbers, and I haven't looked at that photo again. Because deep down, I'm terrified it's not just a figure in the shadows. I'm terrified I'll recognize the face. I was 28 when this happened, and I had just moved to San Antonio for a job. Nothing fancy. I worked customer service remotely, so I was home a lot. I didn't know many people in the city yet, and I was trying to get my life on track after a breakup that left me kind of raw. I found a decent rental, a duplex on a quiet residential street just outside the downtown area. It wasn't glamorous, but the rent was reasonable, and I liked that it had its own entrance and a little patch of yard. The upstairs unit was supposedly empty. Between tenants, the landlord told me, and I honestly preferred it that way. I liked the idea of quiet. No neighbors stomping above me. Just me, my cat Mabel, and a fresh start. The first night I noticed something weird. It was subtle. I was brushing my teeth around midnight when I heard faint footsteps upstairs. I paused, thinking maybe someone had moved in without me knowing, but the sound stopped. The next few nights, it happened again. Soft steps, almost hesitant, like someone pacing slowly from room to room. I thought maybe the pipes were creaking or settling, but it was too rhythmic. Then came the crying. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Short, breathy sobs that lasted a few minutes at a time. Always late, always upstairs. I even texted my landlord, and she swore the unit was still unoccupied. "No one's been up there since May," she said. "You're the only one with keys to the building." I tried to brush it off for a while. I figured maybe I was just anxious from the move or letting my imagination get the best of me. But one night, around 3 a.m., Mabel sat bolt upright on the couch and stared at the ceiling, completely still. Her ears twitched like she was tracking something, and she let out this low, weird growl I'd never heard from her before. Seconds later, the sobbing started again. This time, it was louder, more frantic. It sounded like it was coming from directly above my bedroom. That was the first night I didn't sleep. I stayed up with all the lights on, sitting at the edge of my bed with my phone in hand, ready to call someone, anyone, if it got worse. But it didn't. It just stopped. Like someone had flipped a switch. The next morning I bought a cheap indoor camera and pointed it at my front door. Just in case. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my mom, because I didn't want to sound crazy. But I needed to know if someone was coming in or out. For the next few days, everything was quiet. The camera showed nothing unusual. No crying, no footsteps. I almost started to feel embarrassed for being so paranoid. But on the fifth night, I woke up at exactly 3:03 a.m. My apartment was cold, much colder than usual, and the air felt heavy, like walking through water. Mabel was hiding under the bed, which she never did. I checked my phone and pulled up the camera footage. That was the first time I saw the lock turn on its own. In the footage, the front door handle jiggled once, then the deadbolt slowly turned back, like someone was unlocking it from the inside. But no one was there. Not a shadow, not a movement outside, not even a flicker. Just an empty frame and a door unlocking itself at exactly 3:03 a.m. I watched it over and over, hoping I missed something. Maybe a bug on the lens or a camera glitch. But it was clean, clear, deliberate. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I kept every light on and sat in the hallway with a kitchen knife, heart pounding so hard it made my fingers tremble. The next day I called the police. I didn't know what else to do. I showed the responding officer the footage and explained everything, about the noises, the crying, the cold spots. He looked tired, like I'd just added one more weird call to an already long shift. He offered to check the upstairs unit, which I appreciated. When he came back down, he said it was completely empty. Dusty, sealed, untouched. No signs of anyone living there or even stepping foot inside for months. He told me to change my locks, just in case, but that nothing looked criminal. I could tell he didn't believe me, not really. I think he thought I was just a nervous woman living alone. So I changed the locks, top and bottom. I even bought a second indoor camera and aimed it up the stairwell that led to the upstairs unit, just in case someone had a copy or was sneaking around. I tried to be rational about it, tried to ground myself in facts. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't about someone breaking in. The crying didn't stop. The next few nights it got worse, longer, more desperate. I started to recognize a pattern. The footsteps would begin at 2:50, slow and wandering, followed by the crying, then silence. Then the lock would turn at 3:03. I started setting alarms just to be awake for it, even though it terrified me. I needed to know if it would happen again, and it always did. One night I decided to stay by the door with my phone flashlight on, waiting for 3:03 to hit. I stood completely still, hand on the knob, camera rolling. At exactly 3:03 I heard the click, the exact same click I'd heard in the footage. But the deadbolt didn't move. It stayed locked. What did move, though, was the doorknob. It turned, slowly, just a little, as if someone on the other side was testing it. I couldn't see anyone through the peephole. No shadow, no breathing, nothing. I whispered hello before I could stop myself, and the knob jerked once, like a response. I slammed the bolt back tight and stepped away, heart hammering like a drum in my chest. That was the first time I actually considered leaving the apartment for good. The next morning I called my landlord again and begged her to meet me at the property. I didn't even care if I sounded crazy. I needed someone else to witness it. She agreed, reluctantly, and showed up that afternoon. She brought a locksmith just to humor me. I showed her the camera footage, the logs of the timestamps, even the crying I'd recorded on my phone. She didn't say much, just stood there pale, arms crossed tight. When the locksmith inspected the front door and deadbolt, he looked confused, said the lock had been installed backwards. Only someone inside the apartment could unlock it without a key, he muttered. The landlord looked at me and asked if I had let anyone in. I said no. She didn't ask anything else. That night, she agreed to stay upstairs for a few hours while I stayed downstairs. I felt both safer and more on edge with someone above me. Around 3:05 a.m., I got a call from her cell. When I answered, she was whispering so quietly I could barely make out what she was saying. "There's someone up here," she breathed. I froze. I asked her to repeat it, but the call dropped. I bolted out of bed and ran to the front porch, yelling her name. She came flying down the stairs barefoot and shaking, saying she'd heard footsteps behind the closed bedroom door. And when she opened it, no one was there, but the window was fogged from the inside, like someone had been breathing against it. We both decided not to wait around to find out more. She offered to terminate my lease early, no penalty. I packed up the next morning, left San Antonio within a week. I didn't even take the deposit. I just wanted out. I never found out who or what was responsible. The footage is still saved to a hard drive I've never looked at since. I don't know if she ever rented the upstairs unit again. I blocked the address from my memory as best I could, and I haven't been back to that side of town. Sometimes, when I wake up around 3 a.m. for no reason, I still get that sinking feeling in my stomach, like I'm waiting to hear footsteps above me again. People always say that if you feel something is off, trust your gut. I should have left earlier. Whatever was in that house wasn't human. Or if it was, it had no business still being there. I've read enough stories online to know I'm not the only one who's gone through something like this, but I'll tell you right now, until it happens to you, you don't realize how helpless it makes you feel. You start second-guessing every sound, every shadow. You wonder if it's something attached to you, or if you just got unlucky and walked into the wrong place at the wrong time. Either way, I don't rent bottom units anymore, and I never ignore crying at night. I was 35 when my world got quiet. Too quiet, honestly. My name's Rachel, and back then I was just trying to keep things together after my divorce. It was just me and my daughter, Ellie, 6 years old, full of questions and curls. The kind of kid who says stuff that makes you stop in your tracks. We were living in a small apartment in Durham when my grandmother passed away. She'd always been a bit of a mystery to me. Never visited much, barely called. But in her will, she left me her old bungalow out near the edge of Bladen County, right where the forest starts to swallow the road. It was the kind of house that creaked even when no one was walking, but we needed the fresh start, and it was rent-free. So I packed up our things and moved in, thinking maybe, just maybe, life would get quieter in a good way. The bungalow was old, like really old. Wooden shingles weathered to a gray-green color, vines curling up the porch columns like they'd been holding the place together. Inside, everything smelled like lavender and dust. Ellie loved it instantly, of course. She claimed the smallest bedroom and said it felt like a dollhouse for secrets. I remember laughing at the time, thinking she'd just picked that phrase up from one of her picture books. The first couple nights were uneventful, though I noticed Ellie talking to herself more than usual. I figured it was just her adjusting. Until the fourth night, when I woke up to the sound of the front door unlocking. I bolted up, heart racing, thinking someone had broken in. But when I ran out into the hallway, there was Ellie, barefoot in her pajamas, staring at the open front door. Her hand was lifted slightly in the air, fingers spread, like she was holding onto something invisible. I asked her what she was doing, and she turned to me, wide-eyed and blank-faced, and said, "I'm walking her home." Then she let go of the air, blinked like she was waking up, and started crying. She didn't remember anything the next morning. I didn't want to scare her, so I just told her she probably had a bad dream. But the image of her standing like that, hand in the air, totally still, stuck with me like a splinter in the brain. The next day, while I was unpacking more of the attic boxes, Ellie was sitting at the kitchen table drawing quietly. Normally she doodled cats and flowers and sometimes weird stuff like smiling volcanoes, but this time was different. She'd drawn a tall woman, maybe 7 of them, all in black dresses with no eyes. Just smooth skin where the eyes should be. Each one had long hands that reached down almost to their knees. I asked her who they were, and she just said, "They live here too." My stomach dropped. I tried to laugh it off, told her she had a wild imagination, but I ended up folding that drawing and stuffing it into the back of a drawer. Something about it felt wrong. Too detailed, too confident, like she hadn't imagined it. She'd seen it. A couple days later, I found the first letter. It was just sitting in the mailbox, sealed with a floral sticker. Those old-fashioned ones my grandmother used to love. At first, I thought it was something she'd written before she passed. But the letter was recent, dated only 3 days earlier. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, looped, perfect cursive like she was taught in Catholic school. But what really froze me was the name on the envelope. It wasn't mine. It was addressed to Lily. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside, the letter was short, just a few lines. "I'm sorry you had to find the house this way. Don't let her near the mirror in the hallway. She doesn't understand what she is." There was no signature, just my grandmother's handwriting and that creeping sense that something was deeply wrong. I kept that letter in my nightstand and told myself it had to be a prank, maybe a delayed delivery from months ago. But over the next week, more letters came, all addressed to Lily. Different paper, different pens, but always the same precise handwriting. One warned not to enter the garden after sunset. Another said, "Don't believe her when she cries. She only copies." What really got under my skin was how each letter seemed to reference Ellie, though not by name, and not in any way that made direct sense. They were all filled with cryptic warnings like breadcrumbs in a forest. I didn't show Ellie the letters, but I started sleeping with my door locked and kept the hallway light on all night. Ellie's drawings got worse. Now the women had mouths, gaping, toothless holes with long tongues that drooped out like ribbons. In one drawing, Ellie had scribbled dozens of them, all surrounding a little girl who looked just like her. I asked where she saw them, and she just said, "They come when the lights flicker." That same night, the hallway bulb burst. Not dimmed, not flickered, shattered. I cleaned it up, but I couldn't sleep after that. I lay there listening to the floorboards creak above my head like someone was pacing in the attic, even though I'd locked the hatch myself with a padlock. Then, around 3 a.m., I heard the bathroom faucet turn on. Not drip. Turn on. I ran out of bed, heart pounding, and found Ellie standing on the bathroom counter, staring into the mirror, whispering something I couldn't hear. The faucet was running full blast. I rushed over, lifted her down, and turned off the water. She looked right through me, almost annoyed, and muttered, "She said it's rude to interrupt." I don't know what possessed me in that moment, but I spun her around and yelled, "Who said that?" Ellie blinked, then started sobbing. She had no idea what I was talking about. That night, I moved a dresser in front of the mirror and told her it was broken. The next morning, I finally called my aunt, my grandmother's only surviving sibling. We hadn't spoken in years, but I needed answers. She was quiet for a long time after I told her about the letters and Ellie's behavior. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Your grandmother had another granddaughter, Lily. She was born before you, to your uncle's first wife. But she died in that house, drowned in the clawfoot tub when she was 6. Your grandma never spoke of it again. She believed Lily never left. I asked why no one ever told me this, why I never heard her name growing up. My aunt just said, 'Grief makes people rewrite history.' That line stuck with me. It still does. After that call, I opened every letter again and read them more carefully. They weren't meant for a living person. They read like confessions, apologies, warnings to a ghost. Stay out of the mirrors, sweet girl. They don't belong to you. You are not lost, but you are not whole." I realized then, these weren't just strange messages. My grandmother had been writing to Lily, trying to protect us from her. And somehow, even after death, those letters were still coming. I burned them that night. Every single one. It felt wrong, but I couldn't let Ellie see any more of this. I also called a locksmith the next day and replaced every lock in the house. I nailed the attic shut, removed the hallway mirror entirely, and threw it in the ravine behind the trees. I even had the garden fenced off. But it didn't stop everything. Ellie still talks in her sleep sometimes. She still whispers to someone when she thinks I'm not listening. But she hasn't drawn the eyeless women since I burned the letters. And she hasn't sleepwalked again. Not once. We still live in the bungalow. I know, most people would have left. But I can't afford to. And strangely, after all this, I feel like the house knows we're trying. I keep it bright. I talk out loud to the walls, just in case someone's still listening. And every morning I check the mailbox before Ellie wakes up. If another letter comes, I don't open it. I just burn it. Because whoever Lily is, or was, she's not my daughter. Not anymore. I'm 30 now, and I've been flipping houses full-time since I was about 24. I mostly stick to Michigan. Easy to find cheap, busted-up properties, especially in neighborhoods most people avoid. Some houses just need a little love. Others feel like they're holding on to something they'd rather not give up. This happened last year, in the spring. I'd bought a run-down 2-bedroom on the east side of Detroit. The roof was rotted through, windows boarded up, weeds growing so high they touched the gutters. But it was dirt cheap, and I figured I could fix it up, sell it, and move on like always. At the time, I was living out of a small RV I parked in the driveway. Not ideal, but it made things easier. Less back and forth. The first couple days were just demo work, clearing out trash, pulling up old carpet, ripping out drywall that smelled like wet dog. It was disgusting, but nothing new. I'd throw on my headphones, blast some music, and get lost in the routine. But about a week in, I started noticing weird little things. Tools I swore I'd left in the living room would be in the kitchen the next day. Lights I turned off before bed would flicker back on during the night, just enough to wake me up in the RV. At first, I blamed myself. Renovation days are long, exhausting. Maybe I was forgetting things. Maybe I'd left a light on without realizing. But then it got stranger. I heard scratching. Not like mice in the walls. I've dealt with that plenty. This was more like slow dragging, like something being pulled across old wood. It only happened late at night, always around 3 a.m. I'd get out of bed, flashlight in hand, walk through the house, and find nothing. It made me feel stupid, like the house was playing with me. But I kept going. Work doesn't stop just because a place feels off. Then came the false wall. I found it while tearing out drywall in what I guess used to be a kid's bedroom. Faded dinosaur wallpaper and everything. Behind the wall was a narrow, sealed-off crawl space. No reason for it to exist. It wasn't in any of the floor plans or blueprints I'd pulled. The opening was small, barely wide enough to squeeze into, and blocked by a bolted wooden panel that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. My gut told me to leave it. But curiosity always wins with me. I came back with a crowbar and flashlight and pried it open. Inside the crawl space, the air was stale and heavy, like it hadn't moved in years. Dust coated everything, and there were these strange circular patterns on the floor, like something had been dragged across it repeatedly. At the far end was a stack of old boxes, warped by moisture but still intact. Most of them were filled with junk, broken toys, torn-up books, a cracked Polaroid camera. But in the smallest box, wrapped in plastic and duct tape, were cassette tapes, 7 of them, each one labeled in red marker. Session, June 1996. Session, July 1996. And so on. No names, no explanation. I don't know what made me do it, but I packed them up and brought them back to the RV. I didn't even own a tape player, so I had to go hunt one down at a pawn shop the next day. When I finally played the first one, I was expecting music, maybe someone's diary. But it was a voice, a soft, trembling child's voice. A boy, maybe 8 or 9. The first thing he said was, "Do I have to talk about the visits again?" Then silence. A woman's voice responded gently, "Only what you remember, Caleb." That name stuck with me. Caleb. The boy kept talking, reluctantly, haltingly. "He comes through the wall," he whispered. "He watches me sleep. He doesn't like when I cry." I shut the player off. My hands were shaking. I don't scare easily, but that voice, it wasn't acting. That kid was terrified. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that voice in my head. The way he said, "through the wall," had this raw dread in it, like he really believed it. And I don't know if my brain was just stuck on it, but around 3:30 a.m., I heard something again. A voice. Faint, but clear. A child's voice. I froze in my bed inside the RV. It came from the house, from the same side where the crawl space was. "Don't let him in," it whispered. I swear to God that's what it said. I got out with a flashlight, barefoot on the gravel, and walked toward the house like a complete idiot. The front door was locked like I'd left it, but the light in that back bedroom, the one with the false wall, was flickering again. I hadn't touched that light in 2 days. It wasn't even wired up fully. I opened the door and the room was cold. Not just chilly, freezing. My breath fogged up in front of me. The crawl space was closed, but something felt wrong, like someone had just been there. I stood in the doorway for maybe 10 seconds before the light stopped flickering. Just went out. Total silence. Then, as I turned to leave, I heard it. That same voice, right behind the wall. "Don't go." I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the RV with every light on, the cassette tapes in a box beside me like they were radioactive. The next morning, I told myself I'd finish the reno, list the house, and never look back. But I couldn't shake it. I kept thinking about Caleb, if that was even his real name. Who was he? What happened to him? Why were those sessions hidden behind a false wall, in a room that had clearly belonged to a kid? I tried looking up any old reports tied to the address, but nothing came up. No missing children, no arrests. Just a house that had changed hands half a dozen times and eventually got left to rot. A couple days later, I played another tape. I shouldn't have. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe some kind of closure, but it was worse. Caleb's voice sounded weaker, more defeated. He talked about the man with the wrong face and how he came out of the walls when the house got too quiet. He kept begging the therapist to stay the night. Then, at the very end of the tape, his voice dropped to a whisper. He said, "I won't get to leave this time." And then the recording just stopped. No click, no sign-off, just dead air for the last 2 minutes. That night, something scratched the outside of my RV door. Slow, rhythmic, like fingernails. I grabbed a hammer and burst outside, thinking maybe some local kids were screwing with me. But there was no one there. Just the house, looming in the dark, and one upstairs window, a window that didn't have glass in it yet, looked like it had something behind it. Not someone. Something. I couldn't see clearly, just this vague impression of a tall, narrow figure standing perfectly still. I blinked, and it was gone. After that, I called it. I locked up everything, threw a tarp over the RV, and left town for 2 weeks. When I came back, nothing looked touched. No footprints, no moved tools. But the tapes? They were gone. I still don't know how that's possible. I'd kept them in a locked cabinet inside the RV. No sign of forced entry. Nothing else was stolen. Just the tapes. The crawl space, when I checked it again, looked different too. Cleaner. Like someone had swept it out. I didn't find any new boxes or clues. Just a single cassette, sitting where the others had been. No label. When I played it, it was only one voice. The therapist's. She sounded tired, almost broken. "Caleb is gone," she said. "He's part of the house now." That was it. I finished the renovation in record time. Didn't even paint the walls. Just sold it as is to a cash buyer who never asked a single question. I don't flip homes anymore. I moved into a condo on the opposite side of town. Brand new construction, no history. But some nights, around 3 a.m., I swear I hear soft footsteps above me, even though I live on the top floor. And sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I hear a voice just barely above a whisper. He watches me sleep. I'm Josh, and this happened back in 2016, during my sophomore year at the University of Oregon. I was 20, majoring in psychology, and honestly just trying to coast through the semester without having a breakdown. My friends and I, Caleb, Morgan, and Tyler, had just moved into this off-campus house in Eugene that we found on Craigslist. It was stupid cheap for the size, so we didn't ask many questions. It was an old single-level place with faded green paneling, uneven floors, and that distinct smell of old wood and mildew. But hey, 4 bedrooms, no landlord breathing down our necks, and only a 15-minute bike ride from campus? We jumped on it. The first week was fine. We had to kill a few spiders, and the water pressure sucked, but nothing major. Caleb set up his turntables in the living room, Morgan brought her air fryer, and Tyler and I shared groceries. It felt like the kind of messy, chaotic freedom you always imagined when thinking about college. We had a beer fridge. We had a whiteboard with dumb quotes. We had that "let's survive adulthood together" vibe. Then, on the 7th night, Caleb just left. No note. No texts. His room was mostly cleared out when we woke up. His bed was stripped, but his phone charger and his favorite hoodie were still there. I figured maybe he went to his girlfriend's. But Morgan checked, and she hadn't heard from him either. His car was gone. That was it. The weird stuff started almost immediately after that. One morning, Tyler came upstairs from doing laundry and asked if any of us had been messing around in the basement. None of us had even been down there yet. The light was busted, and honestly, it was the kind of basement you avoid on instinct. Damp, half-finished, with a single bulb dangling on a chain. But Tyler swore there were markings on the floor in chalk. Circles, symbols, and a line of letters that looked almost like a name, but he couldn't quite read it. We thought maybe Caleb did it before bailing, or maybe the last tenants were just into weird stuff. Morgan laughed it off and made a joke about Dungeons and Dragons. That night we all went down to look. The markings were still there. The air was heavy, like it hadn't moved in years. And the smell, earthy, metallic, almost sweet, stuck in the back of your throat. That's when the voices started. At first I thought it was just the old house playing tricks. But lying in bed, lights off, I'd hear whispering. Sometimes it sounded like someone saying Josh, low and drawn out. I'd snap awake and sit up, heart pounding, convinced someone was in the room. But there was never anyone there. Tyler said he heard the same thing, only it said Morgan instead. We thought maybe it was stress. Finals were creeping up. Caleb's sudden disappearance had thrown us off. But then I woke up one morning and my forearm was burning. I pulled up my sleeve, and there were scratches. Not deep, but raw and fresh, and they looked deliberate, like a shape or a pattern, not just random. Almost like someone had drawn something with a knife, except I'd slept through it. And the scratches matched a symbol we'd seen in chalk on the basement floor. We tried to brush it off, told ourselves maybe I scratched myself in my sleep, maybe it was just a weird coincidence. But Morgan pulled up a photo on her phone that she'd taken in the basement 2 nights earlier, just messing around. She zoomed in on one of the symbols on the floor, and it matched the scratches on my arm almost perfectly. She didn't say anything, just turned pale and put her phone down. That same night, Tyler said he heard something breathing next to his bed. He was too scared to turn the light on, just laid there, frozen, feeling this humid breath on the side of his face. In the morning, the corner of his pillowcase was damp. He swore it wasn't sweat. The worst moment was when Morgan started talking in her sleep. We'd never heard her do that before. It wasn't mumbling. It was clear and creepy as hell. Full sentences like she was reading something. She said things like, "The water is still," and "He waits beneath the floor." We recorded her once, played it back in the morning, and none of us could speak for a solid minute. Her voice was low, almost gravelly, and at one point she said, "One must leave, or 3 will stay." I'll never forget the look she gave us when we played it back. She had no memory of saying any of it. After that, she stopped sleeping in her room, started crashing on the couch with all the lights on. I started digging. I don't even remember why. Maybe just trying to make sense of things. I went to the city archives, half expecting to find nothing. But the address did pop up, buried in some public complaints from the 80s. Back then, the house was being rented out to a group called the Lark Foundation. Sounded like some kind of mental health retreat. But after a while, neighbors started reporting strange chanting, smoke, screaming. One woman claimed she saw naked people in the backyard, standing in salt circles. I found an article from 1984 that said a group of students had accused the foundation of psychological manipulation, even said they were being hypnotized and made to harm themselves in the basement. Police had investigated, but no charges were ever filed. The foundation just vanished. I brought all of this back to the house like an idiot. Instead of running, I printed the articles and laid them out on the kitchen table. Tyler didn't want to hear it. Morgan said, "This is exactly how people die in horror movies." But that night, it escalated. We lost power right after midnight. Not just a fuse. The whole grid went dead. Pitch black. We lit candles and tried to laugh it off. But around 2 a.m. we heard something slam upstairs. Not a creak. A slam. like a door had been thrown open. Then the sound of someone walking, slow and heavy, across the floorboards above us. The thing is, all our bedrooms were downstairs. There shouldn't have been anyone up there. Tyler grabbed a bat from under the couch. Morgan was holding her phone up like it would help, even though we had no signal or Wi-Fi. I had the stupid idea to go check. I don't know what I thought I'd find. Maybe just a raccoon or some wind playing tricks. But as we crept up the stairs, turns out there was a narrow attic we'd never even noticed. The air got colder. Like painful cold. The kind that feels wet. The kind that makes your nose sting. And the door at the top? It was wide open. That door had been sealed shut with a strip of old nails when we moved in. But there it was, yawning open into blackness. Tyler whispered, "We shouldn't go in there." And honestly, I think that was the smartest thing any of us said the whole night. The next morning we all packed up. No discussion, no argument. We just agreed. We were done. Morgan called her brother and stayed with him. Tyler moved back into the dorms. I left town for a few days and stayed in a motel in Bend just to get distance. None of us spoke much after that. Caleb never came back. His number was disconnected within a week. His Instagram and Facebook were wiped, like someone scrubbed them. I even called his mom once and she just said, "He doesn't want to be contacted," and hung up. It took a while before I could talk about it without getting that crawling feeling behind my ears. I still don't know what exactly happened in that house. I tried to file a report with the city about what we found in the archives, but no one followed up. The weirdest part? When I checked Zillow last year, the house had been bought and renovated. New siding, new windows, same address. But in the listing photos there was one shot of the basement. And if you zoom in near the water heater, you can just barely make out a faint chalky circle on the floor. Like someone tried to clean it, but couldn't quite get rid of it all. I haven't seen Morgan or Tyler in years, but every once in a while I still dream about that house. Not the inside, just the attic door opening slowly, with something waiting on the other side. I always wake up before I see what it is, and honestly, I don't think I ever want to. I'm not really the kind of person who posts stuff online. I don't like attention. But what happened last fall still messes with my head, and honestly, writing it down might be the only way to feel sane again. My name's Lauren, I'm 41, and up until last year I lived in Denver working as a senior project manager in a digital marketing firm. Burnout doesn't even begin to describe where I was at. Between the panic attacks, insomnia, and constant chest pressure, I knew I had to stop. A friend of mine, Megan, offered me her family's old cabin in the Rockies, said it had been empty for a couple years, and that I could stay as long as I needed. No rent, just peace and quiet. I packed up in late September, drove 6 hours out toward Gunnison, and thought I was heading toward healing. The cabin was tucked into the tree line, not visible from the main gravel road. You had to drive through a narrow, winding path surrounded by tall pine trees that blocked out most of the sun. It was a modest place. Single-story, dark cedar siding. An old satellite dish rusted off the side. Inside it smelled like old wood and dust, but it was cozy. One bedroom, a tiny bathroom, a fireplace, and a deck that wrapped around the front. No cell service, no Wi-Fi. But that was the point. I wanted to disconnect, breathe, maybe read books I hadn't touched in years. The first few days were exactly what I hoped for. Long walks, coffee by the fire, complete silence. But by the 5th night, that silence started feeling too heavy. Like something else was pressing in. It started with footsteps. I was lying in bed reading some dog-eared mystery novel, and I heard what sounded like someone walking across the deck outside. Not like an animal scampering. These were slow, deliberate steps. I froze, closed the book, and listened. The steps stopped. I waited, holding my breath. Then came 3 soft taps on the living room window. I told myself it was a branch. I really did. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, around 1:30 a.m. This time it circled the cabin. Steps on the deck, a tap on the back window, then silence. When I built up the nerve to look the next morning, there was nothing. No footprints, no marks. Just pine needles scattered across the planks like always. Then things started appearing inside the cabin. The first one was on the wall near the fireplace. A name carved into the wood paneling that I swear hadn't been there before. E. Dawson. The letters were sharp, fresh, not faded with time like the older carvings on the beams outside. I ran my fingers over it. It didn't feel like something that had always been there. Over the next few days, more names appeared. R. Kelly, S. Harmon, all in different spots. One behind the bedroom door, one near the window where the tapping kept happening. I started writing them down, thinking maybe I was losing it, like maybe they had always been there and I just missed them. But deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. Around the 10th night, I stopped sleeping altogether. I'd sit in the armchair with a blanket around my shoulders, fireplace crackling, just waiting. The tapping would come like clockwork, followed by the slow, dragging steps across the deck. Once, I thought I saw movement through the kitchen window, a pale face, just barely visible behind the glass. But when I ran over and flipped on the porch light, there was nothing. The woods surrounding the cabin were thick, and the shadows always looked like they were shifting even during the day. I kept the windows closed, curtains drawn, but no matter what I did, I never felt alone. I felt watched, like something just outside the cabin knew exactly when I looked up. I tried to call Megan from town. I had to drive nearly 40 minutes downhill just to get a signal. She sounded surprised when I mentioned the names, said her family never noticed anything like that when they visited, but that no one had really stayed there in years. "Just relax," she told me. "You're probably just on edge." Maybe she was right. Maybe it was the stress, the burnout, my mind playing tricks on me. But that night when I came back, there was a new name carved right above my bed. L. Preston. My name. The lines were fresh, splinters still curled outward, and I hadn't left the door unlocked. I stood there staring at it for what felt like an hour. That was the first time I cried since I got there. The next morning, I hiked down the trail to a nearby house I'd seen a couple times from the ridge. It belonged to an older man named Howard, maybe mid-60s, long gray hair tied back, denim jacket, the kind of guy who had lived in the woods for decades. I asked him if he knew anything about the cabin. He didn't say much at first, just looked at me with this quiet kind of pity. Then he asked, "You hearing it at night yet? The steps?" My stomach dropped. He told me the place used to belong to a man named Elliot Dawson. Lived alone. Went missing in 1997. Cops never found a trace. Since then, people who stayed there would leave after a week or two. Same complaints. Nightmares, noises, a presence watching from the trees. "You'll start seeing it next," he said, without a hint of sarcasm. That night, I barricaded the front door with the armchair and stacked firewood against the back door. I even put a kitchen knife on the nightstand, which felt ridiculous, but I didn't care. Around 1:30, the tapping returned. But this time, there were 2 sets of footsteps. I swear on my life I heard them, one heavy and slow, and one light, like someone barefoot. I stayed frozen in bed, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. Then the doorknob to my bedroom rattled softly once, then silence. And in that silence, I could hear something breathing just on the other side of the door. I didn't open the door. I didn't move. I just lay there, stiff under the covers until the light started to creep in through the cracks of the curtains. When I finally got the courage to look, the cabin was empty. The chairs, the firewood, all still in place. No broken locks, no signs of forced entry. But on the inside of the bedroom door, right where the knob had rattled, was another carving. This one wasn't a name. It was a phrase, etched deep in uneven, jagged letters. "You see me now." My chest tightened so hard I felt like I couldn't breathe. I left that day. I didn't pack. I didn't even grab my laptop. I just got in my car and drove until I hit cell service, then called Megan and told her I'd mail her the key later. I never went back. For a long time I didn't tell anyone, not even my therapist. I just tried to forget it, to write it off as stress or sleep deprivation or whatever else would let me move on. But a few weeks ago, something happened that pulled me right back into it. I got a letter in the mail, no return address. Inside was a folded piece of lined notebook paper. No message, just a list of names. Names I recognized: E. Dawson, R. Kelly, S. Harmon, L. Preston, all of them. And one more at the bottom, added in a different handwriting: M. Reeves. Megan's last name. I called her right away, heart in my throat. She sounded groggy, said she'd just gotten back from spending a few days at the cabin with her boyfriend. I didn't tell her about the letter. I didn't want to scare her, or maybe I didn't want to believe this thing was still going, still aware of who was next. But the next day, she texted me, "Did you ever see faces in the trees? I swear I saw something last night, just staring." I haven't responded. I don't know what that place is. I don't know if it's haunted or cursed or just twisted by years of something unspoken. But I do know this: it watches, and once it sees you, it remembers. I've moved since then, changed my number, started over in a different state, but I still have nightmares. And sometimes, just sometimes, I'll walk past a mirror or a dark window, and for a split second I feel like I'm being watched from the other side. If you've made it this far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Also, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I want to know who stayed with me until the end. See you next time.